Maritime piracy. That's how Iran describes the seizure of its oil supertanker by British Marines. It happened on Thursday off the southern tip of the Iberian Peninsula near Gibraltar, a British territory disputed by Spain. Tehran condemns what it sees as an illegal detention and demands the immediate release of the vessel.
An Iranian foreign ministry official described the UK move as unacceptable and called for the immediate release of the oil tanker, given that it has been seized at the request of the US. The UK Navy's measure is tantamount to maritime piracy. Britain has no right to impose its own unilateral sanctions or those of the European Union in an extraterritorial manner against the other countries. This is the very bullying policy of the US.
Gibraltar's chief minister says the tanker may have been carrying oil to Syria in violation of EU sanctions. However, Iran has provided documents to the UK proving that the vessel was transiting to a permitted destination without specifying where. Spain notes that it was detained by Britain after a US request. Washington applauded the seizure.
Excellent news. UK has detained the supertanker Grace 1, laden with Iranian oil bound for Syria in violation of EU sanctions. America and our allies will continue to prevent regimes in Tehran and Damascus from profiting off this illicit trade.
The White House unilaterally withdrew from the 2015 nuclear deal and slapped harsh sanctions on Tehran. Iran now says it is no longer bound by the agreement and will breach imposed limits on uranium stockpiles. Tehran adds that it's because other signatories, including France, Germany, and the UK, haven't done enough to keep the deal alive. We cross live now to Fouad Izzadi, professor at the University of Tehran's Faculty of World Studies. Now, Britain denies that it acted on a U.S. request. Do you believe the UK on that?
I think so. I think, unfortunately, the UK government is following U.S. foreign policy when it comes to Iran. The only problem with that scenario is that U.S. foreign policy on Iran is failing. They have not achieved to overthrow the Iranian government. The U.S. has failed to get any concessions out of Iran, and the U.S. is losing the concessions they got under the nuclear agreement. And Iran has shown that Iran's military abilities are quite extensive, given the fact that they were able to shoot down the very sophisticated U.S. drone. So Iran has military capability, and Iran has the will to use that capability. So U.S. policy towards Iran is failing, and it's quite surprising that the UK is actually following Trump's orders, which is going to be a disaster for the British people.
Would you say it's likely that this tanker seizure is a part of the U.S. pledge to cut Iranian oil export to zero?
That's what they're trying to do. They have said that's their aim. And this is part of a long list of poking practices that the U.S. government has engaged in. They have put different types of sanctions on Iran. They sanctioned Iran's leader last week. They have sanctioned Islamic Republic Guards Corps a few months ago. They have sanctioned certain individuals 2 or 3 times already. And this practice of poking Iran on weekly basis, I think, will have severe ramifications. I think Iranian leaders are tired of this type of policies, and I think they will respond, and the response is going to be not something that is going to be good for both sides, I think.
A former leader of Iran's Revolutionary Guard has suggested Tehran seize a British oil tanker in response. Do you think that would be the right move?
I don't know if that's going to be a final decision in Iran's foreign policy decision-making process, but I think Iran will have a response, and the response is going to be proportionate to what the UK government has done. Seizing a British oil tanker is an option. There are other options that I think people here are sort of waiting, and they are basically going to do something. What that is going to be, I think time will tell.
Now, Iran's foreign minister says they are protecting the nuclear deal by scaling down commitments to it. Do you think that's correct?
You know, based on the nuclear agreement, Article 26 specifically, Iran has the right to reduce its commitment if the other side does the same thing if the other side reduces their commitment. What has happened with the nuclear agreement is that the U.S. government not only has reduced the U.S. commitment, they have actually gotten out of the agreement altogether. And the Europeans have done the same unofficially. Europe is not doing what Europe is supposed to do under the agreement. So given these facts, Iran's response is going to be getting out of the agreement gradually. They want to give Europe all the time they need to maybe they can reconsider following the U.S. government with regard to the nuclear agreement. So they are not going to do something very fast. They're giving the 60-day notices as they reduce their commitment. But based on what we see from Europe, and especially what happened with the UK decision to confront Iran militarily with taking over of that oil tanker, I think the European leaders are actually not going to do the things they need to do to keep Iran in the agreement. And I think Iran will get out of the agreement sooner or later.